Hey, what is up, all you IHB beginners? Once again, we're looking for nicknames for you guys, so if you have any ideas, feel free to send it to our Twitter page. But I want to welcome you all to the I've Had Better podcast. This is the movies edition, and I am Dominic Damore. It's just me today, as it was last week on Wednesday. Jimmy couldn't join us today. He had an incident at work in which he tried to run his hands through his hair, and they got stuck. So he's not going to be able to join us, but I'm here, and if you don't like that, I really have no other option because I really need you to like my show. But we have a great show for you today. I'm going to give you a review of a movie I saw this weekend. It's a great review about an okay movie. And we're also going to get into the box office breakdown. I'm going to give you the rundown of the top 5 films from last week, and then I'm going to give you my predictions for this upcoming week. Let's kick it off right now. The movie I'm going to review is Neighbors 2: Sorority Rising. What to say about this film? For those of you who aren't aware, it is the follow-up sequel to Neighbors, a film that came out a couple years ago. It stars Seth Rogen, Rose Byrne, and Zac Efron, as well as introduces new characters, Chloe Grace Moretz, Kiersey Clemens, and Beanie Feldstein, because her parents hated her. I'm sorry, the only thing I hear when I see that name is the 1990s Beanie Babies, but I'm fairly certain that girl is so young that she wasn't even alive when those were a thing. So that hurts a little bit. But this film follows a very similar plot to that first film. Burns and Rogen are homeowners who are looking to sell their house, actually. They have already bought another house and plan to move into it, but they have to sell their first house in order to pay for it. And a group of young girls who I mentioned earlier, Moretz, the other one, and Beanie, are young first-year freshmen who attempt to rush their sorority and find out that not only are the sororities not allowed to party, but college parties are filled with just sexist attitudes, horny young men who only want to have sex, and essentially everything that they do not stand for. In a very feminist kind of way, but in a still funny to the story. I was actually impressed with the fact that the film was able to put such a relevant political argument / idea into a raunchy comedy like this. So thumbs up to the screenwriters and whoever's idea was to base this kind of story around that. So the young girls decide that the best thing to do is to open their own sorority in which they can party and everything like that, although they have no idea how to do it. So they get in contact with a man who is a professional partier, former frat star, and now kind of down on his luck, Zac Efron. It was a great way to introduce the character of the film that felt very organic and kind of gave him a reason to be in the movie. They didn't have to force him in, so I like that piece of writing. The writing wasn't really the issue of this film, film-wise. Jokes-wise, we'll get into that a little bit later, but the overall story was solid. So Efron is basically guiding them through the process of starting a sorority, telling them how to make money in order to pay their bills, while at the same time taking on the types of parties they want to take on, and kind of learning the ways of women at the same time. He's very stuck in his frat star ways, so he learns these new things, and it kind of broadens his horizons. So that was cool. And now Rogen and Burns are stuck with the fact that they have a sorority living next door, and the buyers of their house are going to move out and not take the house. So they're kind of in a predicament. They go to the girls and say, hey, can you guys keep it down for like a month and just let us get out of here? But they're like, no, we want to party. Logic kind of falls apart there, but whatever. It's a solid film. Let's get down to some of the nitty gritty. Efron was good in this film. He has kind of found his niche as the raunchy comedy hot guy. I'm not saying all of his movies hit or they even really work. For example, I hated Dirty Grandpa from earlier this year. But compared to some of his other work, I think he's only going to get better in this genre. Plus, I think he's got the acting chops to where he does this goofy, raunchy comedy, and then he goes and does a more serious film, and he's just going to make his more serious film look that much better because he was in a dick and fart joke film. Rogen, as a comedic actor, is usually top-notch, and in this film, he's not quite bad. As a matter of fact, I can't really remember a ton of his jokes. He does a decent amount of physical comedy, so you remember those moments, but pure dialogue-wise, I'm struggling a little bit. And then Rose Byrne, who I personally love. I think she's a great actress, and I really enjoy all of her movies, but her character felt like she took a step back. The first film, I remember a lot of her lines and being really funny and kind of cracking up to myself. I can even think of them a couple today, and they still make me laugh a little. But in this film, she really felt like a supporting character. There just weren't those outstanding moments I was looking forward to. And that might be the problem with this entire film. It's a good movie. It definitely has its moments where it makes you laugh. But the supporting characters aren't quite there. Efron's good. Rogen's good. And even Moretz, she has a couple of funny lines. But in the first film, you had real comedic actors and comedians who were uber talented. Like Christopher Mintz-Plasse, who was in, I think I said his name right. If not, well, hopefully he'll come on the podcast and let me know. But most people know him as McLovin from Superbad. He was in the first film, and he had some really great moments. There's a up-and-coming comedian named Gerard Carmichael, who you might know from The Carmichael Show on ABC. He was very funny in this film. And each one of them had small cameos in the sequel, and honestly, they might have been my favorite parts. Their little 2-minute segments were so funny, and especially Carmichael. He kind of stole the show with one joke. Don't want to ruin it for you, so I won't. But just it has to do with a little bit of bisexuality. So it made me bust up laughing in the middle of the theater. Conversely, characters in this film, they just didn't have that same punch. If you saw the trailers, you probably saw several moments with Beanie Feldstein's character, who is the slightly bigger girl. She's the one who goes flying through the windshield and it has that slow-mo finger flicking, and then, I'm on painkillers, bitch. Super funny in the trailer. She has none of that in this movie. I felt like she was going to be like a Melissa McCarthy in Bridesmaids, and I think we might have gotten 1/10 of that. She just didn't get enough screen time for the most part, and she didn't get enough jokes, to be honest. I don't think they wrote more than like 5 or 10 lines of dialogue for the character, and that was disappointing. Speaking of the trailers earlier, I feel like I saw a different movie. There was so much in the trailer that I was looking forward to that they must have cut out of this film. Just coming off the top of my head, I can remember a scene where they call in LL Cool J, who is the parent of one of the girls, and he confronts his daughter about all the sex toys in her rooms, and that looked hilarious. We did get a, spoilers, cameo from Kelsey Grammer, who plays Moretz's father in the film, and it was an entertaining cameo, and it was more or less like, hey, that's Kelsey Grammer. But the LL Cool J one I thought was really going to hit home. The other one, what I mentioned before, that whole slow-mo going through the car windshield, not in the film. And I realized that maybe they're like, oh, we showed it in the trailer, so we don't want to show it again. I don't believe in that. I laughed every time I saw it in the trailer, and I would have laughed again, and it just didn't have the same effect without that slow motion scene. And then the last one is, it feels like they cut a ton of Hannibal Buress, who was in the first one. He plays a goofy kind of cop person. I say person because he doesn't act like a police officer at all. And you see him in the trailer driving this like tank kind of police vehicle, and that just wasn't even in this film. I wonder what the editors / the studio was thinking, kind of hyping people up for something like that and giving a bit of an underwhelming product in its place. Oh, and then another thing from the trailers that I found really interesting. It felt like they focused on Selena Gomez, the young pop star / actress who's been in some films like on the Disney Channel, but she was also in that awful Ethan Hawke film where he basically drives around in a souped up Mustang for hours on end. Didn't bother to see it because it looked awful, like I said 3 times before. And then she was also in that movie Spring Breakers, which was only fun if you were a 17-year-old boy who can't have access to Cinemax. So, kind of critically acclaimed in a weird way, but overall, not a great film history. But she looked like she was going to be a huge part of this movie. Maybe as the kind of foil to Moretz, the goody two-shoes sorority sister who, in a bit of a cliched way, says, no, don't go party at their house. We want to stay and do our thing like we've always done. Which she didn't do. And I get that it probably would have been cliche, but she was in the movie for such a short time and they focused on her so much in the trailer. I felt a little deceived. Not that I wanted to see a ton of Selena Gomez, but the minute and 30 seconds that we did get of her was basically everything we saw in the trailers. And it just didn't make sense to me. Why not have that third kind of element that you didn't have in the first one, just to make this movie a little bit more fleshed out? I'm sure in the director's cut, the character had way more to do, and the director's cut of this film actually might be way more worthwhile than this film. But overall, I just don't really know what they were doing or going for there. In addition to the idea that the supporting cast wasn't quite up to par, this film also takes it to that next level of unrealistic comedy. Trust me, there's a lot of stuff in the first film that is over the top and would never happen in real life, but this film goes even further. I mean, again, spoilers, because I don't know how to really tell this story unless I reveal parts of the film, but it's not truly crucial and it's not going to crush you in any way by knowing these details. But they go as far as to have a major plot point be to earn money. The girls sell like 7 pounds of weed at a tailgate, which, just for starters, they were able to do so by ratting out every other drug dealer in the area. Okay, that makes sense. And then they went completely Revenge of the Nerds on them, put the weed in a pie tin, covered it up with whipped cream, and then handed it to somebody. I don't understand it. Was it an homage to that film? I certainly hope so, because I love Revenge of the Nerds, and it would feel like a great idea to do that, to kind of bring back the idea of, or bring more people's attention to that classic comedy. But at the same time, it was so over the top that it kind of took me out of the movie, even more than a raunchy comedy should. I get it that these movies aren't going for the epic biopic or something, or realism that you get from The Revenant or something like that, but, you know, leaving a toe in reality is fine. Just don't go full on. I know it sounds like I didn't like the film, and that's not true. I honestly didn't really hate it. It just didn't live up to the standards of the first one. I thought the first one was a solid 7.5 to maybe even 8. And this one came in below my expectations. And granted, I didn't think it was going to be as good as the first one, but just between what they cut out from the trailers and the over-exaggeration of certain elements combined with the weak supporting cast, I couldn't grade this one much higher than the grade I gave it, which, as you all know, is on a scale of 1 to Good Will Hunting. Because Good Will Hunting is the greatest film of all time. I would put that up against any one of your favorite movies. Just give me some suggestions and I will tell you why Good Will Hunting is better. 99% of the argument is Robin Williams. But so my rating for this film was a 5 out of 10 apples. It was just middle of the road for me. It had a couple of good laughs in it, but for the most part, I found myself just kind of watching the movie. It had potential, and I certainly liked my biggest takeaway was, hey, Chloe Grace Moretz is not as bad as I thought she was. So I guess that's a positive to take away. But for the most part, the rest of the movie just kind of, hey, if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. It'll be a fun watch on HBO in like 4 or 5 months, so you can look forward to that. Let me know what you guys thought of the movie if you see it in theaters. Just go to www.ihbpodcast.com and leave a comment on my review, which can be found on my website. Or go to our social media pages, either the Twitter page at IHB Podcast or the Facebook page, I've Had Better Podcast page, and leave a comment. I'd really like to know what you guys thought of it. And seeing as James isn't here because has to have large chunks of his hair removed from his head in order to get his hands out of there, I have nobody else to ask. So, also send best wishes to Jim. The man could lose a finger. We never know. Moving on. You guys are actually going to get a bonus review this week. I'm also going to talk about the Shane Black directed and written The Nice Guys film, which stars Ryan Gosling as Holland March, a kind of down-on-his-luck private investigator, and Russell Crowe as Jackson Healy, a tough guy LA enforcer who, if you pay him enough money, he'll punch anybody you want in the face. That's essentially as deep as these characters go. The basic story is each one individually is hired to track down a girl / get involved in the situation and find out what happened. And at every turn, it leads to the falsified suicide of a porn star and murder and theft and a whole big situation, all taking place in the 1970s Los Angeles. Going into this movie, I had insane anticipation for it. It's a great writer / director, a couple of really top Hollywood actors in Gosling and Russell Crowe, and some really young talent as well. I thought this movie had everything going for it. The trailers looked really good. They looked both funny and also interesting. And I have to admit that I was thoroughly let down. It's not a bad movie. I just want to get that right off the bat. It's actually a pretty decent watch. It's just, I expected more from a story perspective. I thought the characters would be a little deeper. I thought the plot would be a little bit more mystery filled instead of like, oh no, they met that person did it. Because as soon as that happened, as soon as we meet the bad guy, I instantly was like, yep, no, but she did it. Spoilers for the pronoun game there by saying she. But Gosling was funny. His character didn't feel totally 100% original to me. It just felt like kind of a mishmash of some of his past performances, particularly his role in Gangster Squad and Crazy Stupid Love. Just kind of heavy, funny accents and some girly screams along the way of a semi-drunk private investigator. He definitely had the most laughs of the film, so props to him for branching out and becoming kind of a comedic actor in this movie. Russell Crowe, on the other hand, plays a badass. That's about it. His character at the end kind of gets a moral transfusion as he goes from the guy who's like, yeah, no, we're going to kill him, to, no, we don't have to kill this guy, despite the fact that he's killed many, many people. All because of a little girl, but I'll get to that in a second. Anybody who's listened to the podcast or read any of my work knows how I feel about child actors. The pacing of the film was a bit uneven. We got really ramped up at moments, and then we kind of fell back down, and we got ramped back up and fell back down, and I just, it made me really lose interest at certain points because my adrenaline is going, and then all of a sudden we're back sitting in a kitchen. And perhaps it was just the mood I was in that day. I had trouble really staying involved in the film. I'm going to butcher this name, but Angourie Rice, who plays the daughter of Ryan Gosling. Young girl, can't be more than 13 or so. She did a fine performance. I just don't understand Hollywood's obsession with putting children into movies like this. I mean, there's gunplay, there's death of porn stars, and it's not like a moral thing, like, oh my god, these children shouldn't be seeing this. It's just the fact that she would get shot. She would die. She is the same height as most people's bullets. Like, at least with somebody, like, taller, like, okay, you can aim for them, but it's, like, point the gun straight out, it's going to their forehead. And yet she never feels like she's in danger throughout the movie. And in fact, at certain moments, she's kind of the hero. And I just thought that she wasn't necessary. She kind of acted as a moral compass, as I mentioned earlier, for Russell Crowe's character that didn't feel organic in any way. And it was really bothering me that this character is so pivotal. And I wanted to focus on the relationship between Russell and Gosling. I didn't need this third, smaller person involved in this entire story. For example, spoilers, but near the end, the girl is in a room with another woman who has a gun, and they're trying to stop the ultimate device / problem from happening, and the girl kind of just does it without ever getting even a punch thrown at her. Didn't make sense at all to me. And I know I'm just being very vague on the subject, but it just, I didn't like this aspect at all. And if you take her, she had no real purpose in the film. She had more impact on the outside character in Russell Crowe than she did on her own father. So I didn't really see a strong bond between those two. And it just didn't feel necessary to me. I liked the idea the movie was set in the 70s. They did a wonderful job of showing that off. I never felt like they were like shooting on some back lot in LA or something. And in fact, I think they shot in Atlanta. But Shane Black did a really solid job of showing that and creating a deep kind of world in order to present this film. So again, I'm just gonna make this short because it's a film that I think is going to be fairly decisive or divide its audience members. The critics really loved it. I think it was around 90% on Rotten Tomatoes the last I checked, but it didn't do very well in its opening weekend. I'll get to that a little bit later in the box office breakdown. But I don't even know if I saw this movie once, and I think that's enough for the rest of time. There's nothing that's going to draw me back to this movie and be like, oh, I want to watch it over and over again. And that's important to me when it comes to my final rating on a scale of 1 to Good Will Hunting. This is something I click past on the TV. It's a DVD I don't even pick out of the bin. And for the most part, it kind of missed its mark with me. I had a ton of enthusiasm heading into the film, but leaving the theater, I just kind of felt like, all right, that was a solid 2 hours of my life. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, but I really wanted to love it, and that probably is the most disappointing fact of it all. Maybe that's my fault for getting too involved. I just love so deep. I want it all to be good. Doesn't take a whole lot to make me love a film. Couple of big moments. Don't have a 13-year-old girl be the ultimate hero of the film who convinces a 49-year-old man, like, hey, what you've been doing for the last 20 years, you don't have to do it that way. Whatever. It's Shane Black. He knows better than I do. But in this case, I think he was wrong. Let me know what you guys think. Maybe you guys like child actors. Maybe you thought the girl was cute and she was the fun, plucky moment in the film. Now, you can let me know by going to the Twitter page using the hashtag IHB Movies. Or, you know what, let's try a new hashtag. Maybe hashtag IHB No More Children. That's a bit negative, huh? You know what? We're going to stick with IHB movies. Maybe just throw your hate towards child actors directly in a tweet to me. Or hit me up in my direct messaging. Kids still say direct messaging these days? I know it was National Send a Nude Day the other day. The IHB podcast did not get many, for the record. Maybe for the best. I'm rambling at this point, but hopefully you guys are liking what you're hearing. Let's go on to the box office breakdown. All right, IHB beginners. This is the portion of the show where Jimmy and I usually give the results for last week's box office, as well as giving our predictions for next week's in a little game. The way it works is the two of us compete in a competition for bragging rights between friends who want nothing more than just to embarrass the other guy as much as possible, and for who buys the first drink each week, of course. How the game works is each week my co-host and I will predict the top 5 films of the box office. Whoever gets closest to the correct order wins a point for the week. Unfortunately, James has won the last 2 weeks because he refuses to take risks whatsoever and essentially goes chalk every time. But this week was a little interesting. We had similar lists, but I decided to put my faith into the Disney Jungle Book machine, and I came up just a bit short, but I'll get to that in a minute. The results for this week's box office are as follows. In a possible upset for someone like James and I, Angry Birds stole the top spot, just like Spider-Man stole Captain America's shield, earning $39 million in its opening weekend. While Captain America Civil War fell another 54% from last week, landing in the number 2 spot with $33.1 million. Third place goes to Neighbors 2, Sorority Rising, taking in just shy of $22 million, while another debut film, Shane Black's 1970s detective comedy, The Nice Guys, was only able to manage $11.3 million. And finally, rounding out the top 5 was The Jungle Book, earning an additional $11 million for a global total of $850 million. All that for a movie with one real character. It's impressive. That movie is a marvel and a feat, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go see it before it leaves theaters. Visually spectacular. But let's get into the top of the list right now. Angry Birds coming in first. That's a bit of a surprise for me. I thought it would do well, but I just, some of the reviews I'd heard weren't great. I thought some parents would shy away because the trailers were a bit on the riskier side. They weren't quite as PG or G-rated as some other animated films you might see. Or at least they showed more in the trailer. Because a lot of animated films insert those dirty jokes that only parents get, but not usually in the trailer. $38 million, solid number. Similar to that of Over the Hedge from a few years ago. It's in that same range, but in no way is it even close to a Zootopia, which had been dominating the box office for weeks and weeks and weeks. Speaking of that, the number 2 spot, Captain America, actually became the first film to earn $1 billion this year, passing up Zootopia for the highest grossing film of the year. So that was very impressive. Did it in 3 weeks. Really solid numbers. They're now the 4th highest grossing domestic MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe film, and the 19th biggest film of all time worldwide. Both of the films that I reviewed earlier, they have to be a little disappointed in their performance this week. Neighbors 2 debuted 55% less than the first film came in, despite having a fairly decent Rotten Tomatoes score of 61%. It's a nice, raunchy, R-rated comedy. I thought it would do well. But perhaps that film and The Nice Guys kind of pulled away from each other, and also it was just a stacked box office week, guys. There's no other way to say it. I mean, you got hangovers like Jungle Book and Captain America. You've got 3 major films debuting, which nowadays with how expensive movies are, unless you're A guy like me who decides to devote every living penny that he has to going and seeing these movies just so he can tell you how shitty they are, it's tough to go out and see multiple movies in a weekend. So you kind of got to pick and choose. And clearly this week, people wanted to see Angry Birds and Captain America kicking ass again. So Neighbors 2 coming in at just shy of $22 million. Probably a little underwhelming, but again, this is a comedy. They made it for not an insane amount of money. I don't know the exact number, but I'd be surprised if it was more than $25 million. And even that's probably pushing it a little bit. So they have to be disappointed in the 22, but they're going to make money, so it's all good. On the other hand, The Nice Guys, completely opposite situation. Rumored budget of around $50 million, and in your opening weekend, you only make 11. That's got to be disappointing. Probably not a movie that does great internationally either, because it's kind of American-centric, and it's a bit raunchy and graphic, so it won't do well in certain markets. But there's also a heavy marketing push on this movie. So you're betting in at least another 30, maybe even 40 million in marketing, pushing this total to possibly $90 million budget. And at $11 million opening weekend, there's just no way you're going to make your money back on that. Shane Black has to be disappointed, and Gosling hasn't had a hit in a while, so maybe he's going to change up what he did. One movie that kind of left my interest was the number 6 spot actually went to Money Monster, a film that I reviewed last week and gave some details about its box office performance, which wasn't great. But this week, it actually earned $7 million. It only dropped off about 52% from last week. And that surprised me a little bit. I did not particularly enjoy this movie. I was surprised with how much it actually came in below my expectations last week for domestically. And going forward, it's a little surprising that it hung on that well. I thought for sure we'd see around like $5 million for this movie, but good for it. It made a little bit more of its money back, and maybe that finally speaks to the name of, hey, Clooney and Julia Roberts. Maybe they're not first weekend pulls anymore, but for the people who are just looking for something to see a couple weeks after it comes out, maybe that's what the new draw is of a movie star. As far as my picks for this week, in the number 1 spot, I'm going with another superhero film debuting. This is the fourth one in almost 4 months. If you say Deadpool, Batman vs. Superman, Captain America, and now X-Men Apocalypse, I have this coming in number 1, but to be honest, I think there's going to be some superhero fatigue going on. I think I'm going to see like 85 to 90 million for this movie, which is down about 120 million from the last film, X-Men Days of Future Past. The reviews for the film are just not very good right now. Combine that with the fact that it looks like more superheroes fighting more superheroes, and X-Men has never really had that same following as Marvel movies, considering highest grossing opening weekend for them was the 110 or whatever from Days of Future Past. So I'm expecting around 80 million. It's a solid number for them, but almost half of what Batman vs. Superman took in, and people were way disappointed in that one. In number 2, I have Alice in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass. Another sequel. The reviews on this movie are even worse than the reviews for X-Men Apocalypse. It's not a movie that I have any interest in seeing, but it's in like 4,000 theaters. So it's going to be tough not to put number 2, even if half the audience goes to see it. I think it'll have enough of a pull, and it's weird enough. And plus, I think it's going to get a lot of those 3D viewings, which will contribute to its overall box office pull. In 3rd spot, I'm going Captain America. This is a little bit controversial because it's dropping. That means I'm dropping Angry Birds, the winner from last week, to at least 4th. But the movies were fairly similar, and I just think the box office pull of Captain America might hang on one more week, and people will see Angry Birds as a little bit more of a drop-off. And number 5, I revealed my number 4 already. I'm going with Angry Birds number 4. I just don't think it's a quality movie. I don't think it has the legs of the other animated films that have come out in the past. So I see it doing 18 million maybe. In 5th spot, I'm going Neighbors 2. It did 22 opening weekend. You take even half of that, which I think it'll do because it's the only real R-rated comedy that'll be out, aside from The Nice Guys. But if that only makes 11 million opening weekend, you can't expect much from it this weekend. So I take Neighbors 2 to earn probably at least 11 to 12 million, and that should be solid enough numbers for the 5th spot. James has a different list than me. He has much more faith in Angry Birds. He is going X-Men number 1. Then he's going Angry Birds number 2, Alice in Wonderland number 3, Civil War number 4, and Neighbors 2 in the 5th spot. You guys can let us know what your top 5 picks are for the next week. Just send a tweet to IHB Podcast, or you can look us up on Facebook and just comment on our wall. That is the I've Had Better Podcast page. Or you know what? You can even send us a good old-fashioned email to ihbpodcast@gmail.com. All right, so that was the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Once again, I was all by myself. I just got a text message from Jimmy, which means his hands are now free. He's got several bald patches, but he said it'll grow back quick. A couple of dabs of olive oil, and that thing just springs up. So, send him good wishes on Facebook and on Twitter. You can find him at the Kaiser Sose. That's at the THE_KEYSER_SOZE. Wish him well in his recovery, and hopefully that hair bounces back to its original glory. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode and my one-on-one talk with you guys, please like the episode and subscribe to the I've Had Better Podcast page. Do me a favor and just share it with anybody you know. We really like to get our subscribers up. I think we're around 18 right now. Solid number, but I'd love to get that up into maybe even the 30s in the next couple of weeks. So if you know somebody who hangs out a lot on YouTube, we're really great to listen to at work because I can ramble with the best of them, and occasionally we throw out some interesting facts. But in addition to on YouTube, you can find us on Twitter at IHB Podcast, and on Facebook, you can go like the I've Had Better Podcast page. Also, we are on iTunes. You can go and download the audio version of our show, which doesn't have all the fun pictures and stuff that I work on so hard for you guys. But hey, sometimes you just want to hear the sound of my voice. Just go onto iTunes and search I've Had Better Podcast, and it'll pop right up for you. This will be the 11th episode up there, so you got plenty to catch up on. They're great for the morning commute, the way home, or, just to drown out the voices of your loved ones that you don't want to hear when you come home. I am, as always, Dominic Demore. You can find me on Twitter at Dom Demore. That's DOMDEMORE. Or on Facebook at Dominic Demore. That's ends with an NIC, not a NICK, despite what my aunt will tell you in her gift cards to me every year. Still hurts, Aunt Delilah. Still hurts. I'm just messing with you. Not that you listen anyway. But I hope you guys liked the show today. And as always, I wish you guys the best. Hey, Dom, how was the show this week? I've had better. Good night, everybody.